Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing the latest episode of The Last of Us and talk about picking your poison. This episode finally kicks it off. However, I feel like it's too little too late. I thought this episode was incredibly well choreographed. Everything was perfectly in sync. Ellie, Jesse, and Dina had to survive the infected, the WLF, as well as the scars, all within seconds, and each one is presented to us as equally terrifying. The way Ellie went from prey to predator, I think really illustrates how easy it is to become everything you hate. And I think if nothing else, the show is worth watching just to look at. I'm still not sold on this idea of Ellie being ruthless. I have trouble kind of buying into it because on one hand, the show does this great job of utilizing her physicality, not just her immunity, but the way that she's able to sneak in and out of places. And the way, especially with this episode in particular, I mean, they didn't stand a chance against the infected. However, it then tries to turn her into this action star. Like there was a scene, like an edit, where she puts her gun in her pocket. And I was like, sis, your hands are too small. Like, I don't know. It was turning into like a CW level of, it was kind of cartoonish in a way. And so y'all tell me if you felt the fear in the end, but everything else was working very well for me. I still don't buy Dina and Ellie's relationship. I think the way Dina just spoon feeds us her whole life. What I loved about this episode, it was action packed. And I think the show could have done a better job at building Dina's and Ellie's relationship through more of these encounters, either with the scars or with the WLF. Instead, we've had so much downtime. And so this episode was like a necessary energy booster. The episode begins with an absolute banger of an opening, and these openings have always been fantastic. We are informed that the basement of the hospital is not just filled with infected, but with spores, an airborne version of the disease. This hospital actually housed the first cordyceps patients, and so this was basically where humanity ended. And the idea of this airborne disease, I mean, this show just it just gets more depressing. If somehow these spores make their way to the surface, humanity is pretty much left defenseless. Whatever is left of mankind will be destroyed. In order to secure the basement of this hospital, a mother had to sacrifice her son. And I think what makes this show particularly scary is how so many parents have outlived their children. Or if their children have outlived their parents, their last memory of them is something violent and horrific. So far, it has nothing to do with the infected. When you think about how Abby's father died, if he was infected, that'd be one thing, but he was murdered in cold blood by a man who never thought about him again. This hospital is very important to the WLF. It's basically their headquarters. When I was watching the WLF, not just in terms of numbers, but ammunition, getting to Abby won't be easy. Now, before the drama starts, Dina is able to listen in. I guess they steal a radio from one of the soldiers they killed, and the WLF just constantly talk about their plans over the radio. And I think it's very telling how the WLF is not concerned about Fedra, because that tells me that they're pretty much done throughout the country. On their way to the WLF, they spot a number of mutilated bodies. And as an audience, we've been thrown in the middle of this war. A war at the moment that's far more interesting than this whole revenge plot with Joel. I think if Dina knew why Abby killed Joel, I don't think she'd be sacrificing her life and potentially her baby's life for this. When they get to their location, they're immediately greeted by infected, and the way the infected sort of swarm was so eerie and well done. First, they kind of spot a few of them, and Ellie immediately notices that one of them is smart, or at least more evolved. And they can handle a few, but that few quickly turns into many. And something the show does very well is whenever the infected show up, I don't care who's on screen, I just want them to get away. Like, you automatically root for the person running away from the infected. When Jesse arrives, the show gets a lot more interesting, and he's as annoyed as we are as an audience. He kind of looks at Ellie, he rolls his eyes. He makes it clear. He's like, me and Tommy came to save you because y'all would have died any day now. And we're not here to avenge Joel. We are here to go home. I do think Tommy missing, especially with 2 episodes left, doesn't really make any sense to me, because the only person that could rally is his brother. And if his own brother is saying, let it go, you do feel like, as an audience, like, okay, maybe maybe the stakes are not as high as we would like. I thought the way this whole scene was choreographed was honestly Oscar worthy. They're running from the infected, and then immediately Jesse has to start firing at the WLF. And then they go into the woods and have the misfortune of seeing the scars who also start attacking them, and each one is just presented to us as equally terrifying, so you don't really know who to be more scared of. In the forest, we get our first sort of proper glimpse of the scars, and it seems like this war, each side has taken territory, and this is why they don't go into the forest, because the scars live there. And the way they impaled this man, again, it's so bone chilling. I also thought the whistle, like the way they communicate with each other, whistling, is something that I would love to unpack. And what's scary about the scars is you don't know where they are. They're whistling to communicate with each other, but they're kind of hiding in plain sight. And so when the arrow goes through Dina, it takes you by surprise because you're like, how did you see them hiding? And the way this scene is choreographed is well done. Jesse immediately takes Dina, and so we focus on Ellie, and immediately we are now back to the main storyline. I like how the show utilizes her size, the way that she's able to kind of sneak into the hospital without anybody looking. And I think there was a way for them to build Ellie's character without trying to make her kind of like a Rambo figure. The conversation between Nora and Ellie was well done. I actually thought Nora stole the scene. I mean, she had one hell of a run. The way she told Ellie he got exactly what he deserved. I mean, the way that Nora is built, to be honest, Ellie didn't stand much of a chance. I thought Ellie being alone made sense, especially considering how the episode ended, because Ellie is the only person that could have made it out alive. While Nora is escaping from Ellie, she pretty much is stuck between a rock and a hard place. If she tries to fight Ellie, she will likely be shot. And so she takes her chances in the basement, a basement filled with spores. And this is the first time we're getting a glimpse of this. And this scene was absolutely breathtaking. The way the spores had overtaken the hospital, the way these WLF members were kind of being overtaken by the infection was like, honestly, the show, if nothing else, is worth watching. Like the way the spores were coming out of his mouth, it was just so beautiful to look at. As soon as the shaft is open and Ellie runs after Nora, the WLF immediately focus on closing the shaft. And one thing the show does well is prioritize the infected. Regardless of the violence and conflict between different groups, none of this matters if this infection continues to spread. When Ellie finally corners Nora, like the way the scene shifts to red, again, it was stunning to look at. Like this episode, the cinematography was 10 out of 10. I thought her reaction to Nora telling her why Abby killed Joel was interesting, because you could see that she was visibly bothered by it, but she was trying hard to hide it. I also think Nora's reaction to Ellie's immunity was very telling. Ellie is an urban myth. The only people who knew she existed was Abby's father and everybody who died in the hospital that day. And I do wonder how knowing about Ellie's existence changes why Joel did what he did. I don't think Abby would care, because at the end of the day, that was her father, and she was justified in killing Joel. However, I don't think a lot of people believe that someone who's immune exists. I thought the way the scene mirrored Abby's torture scene was also well done, and it felt very natural. It didn't feel forced. My only gripe with this scene is I have trouble buying Ellie as a ruthless monster. Like when she puts the gun in her pocket and she leans down, it mirrored Abby a little bit too much. It was a little bit too on the nose, to the point where I felt it was a bit cringy. Watching her beat Nora, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really feel anything. I didn't feel the fear. It felt very, I don't know how to describe it. Y'all tell me, were you feeling the fear? Were you feeling the ruthlessness? Because I wasn't. I think the show is struggling with Ellie's character, because Ellie was never a ruthless monster. I understand that she's very triggered by Joel, but I have trouble really believing, based on the Ellie we met in season 1, that Abby getting revenge on Joel because he killed her father would not affect her in some way. Like, that just seems to be a huge oversight. Like, if Ellie didn't know, that would be one thing. But the fact that Ellie has known this whole time makes an already unlikable character, I would say, even more unlikable. I don't know. Y'all tell me what you think, because the Ellie we were introduced to in season 1 would have been, I think, more empathetic. And the Ellie we're getting here just feels cold and ruthless, for the sake of being cold and ruthless. So y'all let me know what you think, and until next time.